Hello everyone, welcome to my Alien Isolation, Nightmare difficulty, no damage, no human kills walkthrough, and this is the finale, and this will cover the rest of the missions. And I have had to do a lot of editing for this particular video, guys, way more editing than in the previous videos, because you're spending a lot of time in these remaining missions not really doing anything, and there's not that many threats. There's only a couple of humans, like at least 2 androids, and then you're dealing with the xenomorph for the rest of the missions. But then there are parts to the missions where you're doing absolutely nothing. You know, like the Anisadora encounter. I've only included the facehugger encounter and the little running sequence at the end because those are the only parts that are actually threatening in the Anisadora. The rest is just like a walking simulator, and it once again diminishes the whole value of having Marlowe in this game because all of his sections are just very boring sections that just negatively impact the pacing of this game, and it really makes you not want to enjoy the game. I just don't get why they settled on such formats. And then there are sequences where you're inside of a spacesuit and you're having to do all these really mundane tasks in order to progress the game. And I can understand why they're doing them. I mean, they're far more interesting than the Marlowe encounters, but there's no reason to include them because there's no threats to you whatsoever whenever you're inside of the spacesuit. And then I've also trimmed out some puzzle moments, like when you're inside of Seegson Communications and you're doing those puzzles that allow you access to the array, it just takes up too much time. So you're going to be seeing some weird transitions with that particular area of the game. And that pretty much represents the number of edits I've had to do in order to make this video digestible. But also, by the way, this sequence here, you have to use your gun and parry the Super Joe's grab. And then when you do that, it will alert the xenomorph, and you're going to have to be extra cautious when getting to this door, because there is a high possibility that the xenomorph could potentially get behind you while you're hacking this door, and you'll have to use your flamethrower very quickly. But aside from those 2 threats, there's nothing else you really have to worry about when it comes to doing this medical facility again. But you might have noticed that I picked up a blueprint for version 3 of the Flashbang. I think they give you that because of the big encounter with Seegson Security, only I don't even use the flashbang for that particular encounter. I use the flare to distract the enemies, and then when I return through that area, I let the xenomorph do all the dirty work. Well, to be honest though, I think my original approach to that particular section could have been better, and because of that, I've decided to put in an updated strategy for that section at the end of this video. But I've skipped a huge chunk of the Anisadora, and now we're just having to escape. And you have to be very careful of the fire, because the fire has a lot of phantom range. Whoever programmed the hitbox on the fire did a really poor job, which is why you have to give the fire the widest berth possible so that you do not get screwed by phantom range. But there's still more running we have to do, and it's trying to make it seem all epic, but we've just done a completely mundane and boring sequence before this, so it really doesn't feel all that exciting. I mean, the whole moment where you get to hear that audio log from Ellen Ripley is really cool, and it helps link this game to the Alien franchise. And it's at least a skippable cutscene and not a moment you're forced to sit through. You know, I gotta give credit to the developers for at least putting that in as a way of salvaging their attempts at actually trying to link this game to the Alien franchise. But the xenomorph is not a threat at the moment. We now have this really big encounter with Seegson Security, and I'm going to use the flare right here. You need to make sure you're not making any noise. The pathing on these enemies is completely random. Like right now, there could be a guard walking in that room who could see me as I'm throwing that flare, and you have to bear that in mind before you throw the flare. But you need to throw the flare at that distance so that it'll actually bounce to the other end of that room. And what this will do is it will not only attract all the Seegson Security near you, but it will also attract the Seegson Security guards that are positioned in that other control room that is right ahead of me. So I've done it correctly. So now I'm just going to remain crouched, and then I'm going to start sprinting. There is a guard directly ahead of me, but when he is in the correct spot, which is right near these boxes I just passed, he will be attracted to the flare, and I'll be able to get past him. But one thing I definitely recommend as a better strategy is when you throw the flare and you get near the other control room, you'll want to go into that control room and just go through the vent. That way you'll be able to unlock a door that will allow you easy access back into that ventilation duct, and it'll make getting past the humans while the xenomorph is around way easier. And also, there is another strategy that is a little bit slower, and Carcinogen SDA demonstrated in this channel, but in that whole communication area, there is actually a android that is locked inside of a room, and when you free him, he's gonna try to kill all the other humans, and he does a pretty good job at killing them, because the humans can't actually kill the Super Joe, because they can only drop him down to about 1 HP, and then you're able to finish it off. It is really good design, but I don't like to do it because it takes a little too long at times, because it requires you to go through a lot of ventilation ducts. But I've skipped that whole puzzle sequence, and now we're just going to skip that whole spacesuit moment, and now we have a pretty tricky encounter coming up. So, I don't know if the positions of these humans are randomized whenever you just sprint through the room initially, or if the humans are always going to be in random positions regardless of what you do. But it's going to be very hard to isolate the Xenomorph from yourself, and because of that, you're going to have to do a lot of waiting to ensure that the Xenomorph actually goes in the correct direction that will allow you to get inside of this vent to my right, and also use a distraction to bring the Xenomorph to you. Because what I'm going to do is, after I open this, I'm going to strike this wall to lure the Xenomorph near there, and this will buy me enough time to get up here, and I'm not going to use the crouch exploit method where I move very quickly while crouching, because the Xenomorph can for some reason hear you whenever you do it. And now that I'm up here, the Xenomorph is still down there, and I make a mistake. I should have hugged the left-hand side and gotten behind those crates so that the Xenomorph was less likely to spot me. Because, you'll hear right here, the Xenomorph was kinda close to spotting me just then, but I was able to get inside the elevator in time, and it wasn't able to get me. And trying to interact with those doors while you're trying to keep your flamethrower on the Xenomorph is really hard to do because the detection on the buttons is really bad. And also right there, when you go down the stairs, you need to go back up, because when you go down the stairs, you will trigger a scripted encounter with the Xenomorph that will force it to go into the vents. And now that it's inside the vents, it's going to come down into the communication area randomly and start killing the humans. It's not guaranteed initially, but you'll have to wait a little bit longer if that's the case. Either that, or you can use your revolver as a distraction in order to force the Xenomorph out of the vents, and then that will allow the Xenomorph easy access to the humans. But you'll have to move away, because whenever the Xenomorph hears a distraction and it prioritizes the humans first, it will then go for the distraction that you made after it kills the right amount of humans. So, I get very lucky here, and I don't have to utilize my revolver. And the Xenomorph is just going to go and start killing these humans. But you see the vent to my right? That's the door you would be able to open if you did the updated strategy, which I'll showcase near the end of this video. If I wanted to go inside that ventilation duct, it'd be very dangerous because you're incredibly vulnerable while you're using your ion torch on those particular doors, because they take such a long time to burn through. But I'm just being very cautious right here. You'll want to go into that room directly ahead of me, so that you're not going to run the gambit so much with the Xenomorph, and most likely, you will not get caught by the Xenomorph while it is attacking the humans. But I generated a distraction just then to force the Xenomorph out of the vents, so that it'll most likely kill the humans. And it's not going to come into this ventilation duct. I mean, the chances of the Xenomorph going inside of the vents are pretty low. But you see that android there? That is where you're able to go in order to unlock a door to get that android out, and it will start killing the humans initially. But there is a door right here. And one thing I don't like about this animation is that you can't stop Ripley from doing it once you initiate it, so you can't peek out and just use that to your advantage when it comes to understanding whether you're supposed to get out of the vent or not. So you can get caught a lot of times while you're in that animation, because she doesn't just simply unlock the latches but not open the door. She does the full animation, and it's very dangerous. But the Xenomorph has killed a number of humans right now, and this is where its pathing is going to be kind of random. So I need to keep watch over where it is, and if it does get into a position that's very dangerous, I need to use my flamethrower, or I can use my Molotov. I mainly utilize my Molotov here because I know I have enough resources to create another Molotov in case I need it. I get into a spot of bother where the Xenomorph is off in that direction, but it turns around and it spots me. So I'm gonna have to use my Molotov here. And like I said before, the Molotovs are so consistent when it comes to forcing Xenomorphs back into the vents. because they do a lot of high damage when they explode, and that high damage allows the Xenomorph to always go away. It's so good, but just make sure that the Xenomorph isn't close to you, otherwise it will Hyper Armor through the Molotov cocktail, and it will kill you. Or worse, you'll get screwed by Phantom Range on the Molotov and you'll die. But whenever the Xenomorph is running away to the vents, you always want to start sprinting, because the Xenomorph has to stay inside of the ventilation ducts for a set amount of time before it actually comes back down to attack you. And during that time, you're free to sprint. And it is a very reliable method when it comes to speeding up the process and getting past these sections. But this right here is one of the buggiest missions I encountered when I was doing this walkthrough. The guy that's inside of this room right now, he has no shotgun. His shotgun is just floating in the air, and he has no weapon. And when he spots me, he's not going to be able to kill me because he's just going to throw all these threats at me, but not actually have the will to shoot me or just attack me because he has no weapon. And because of this unique bug, it was presenting with a consistent crash that would occur whenever I would open the door that had the facehugger in it. So I had to resort to a strategy where I would lure the Xenomorph by hitting a crate and have the Xenomorph kill that human. Because as long as that human is alive and the bug is active, you will always get the crash. And there's no way of just simply chancing it where you will not get the crash. I know I said that in the previous video, but I was completely misremembering my experiences. And having encountered this crash so many times, I tried to utilize a checkpoint to my advantage because I thought reloading the checkpoint would fix this issue. It didn't. The checkpoints on this game will completely save any broken state, so it will completely save this guy with having his shotgun floating in midair and with him just not being able to do anything. And I'm just put into a spot of bother. So, if this bug happens to you, you're screwed. And you'll most likely have to resort to a flare in order to lure this guy away, as Kursanjan SDA demonstrated in this walkthrough. And what he did in this walkthrough is he would actually throw his flare over in that corner over there to lure the guy away, and this would buy him enough time to actually gain access to the code. And that's something I don't like about this game. I hate how you have to examine a journal in order to gain access to a code. You can't just simply punch in the code and just guess the number. You have to actually get the journal, otherwise you'll not be able to access the passcode. I think it's just very outdated scripting, and it really isn't necessary. But as you'll see right here, I'm trying to melee this crate to lure the Xenomorph away, but the Xenomorph isn't around at the moment. And I probably should have used my revolver, because the revolver generates a greater amount of sound, compared to just smashing things with your maintenance jack. And, see, he sees me, but he's not going to be able to do anything. And the Xenomorph has spawned in, so the Xenomorph is going to kill this guy. And do not assume that you can use the facehugger in this room to my right as another way of killing this human, because the facehugger only prioritizes you. It's so dumb, but I've pushed the Xenomorph back into the vent, and now I'm just going to be able to kill this facehugger. And thank God the game didn't crash, because that human is dead. So I need to interact with the transit system, and because I made noise, that will cause the Xenomorph to come back. That's just something that the developers intended on happening. They wanted you to get screwed by randomness in this part. So if that happens, just use a Molotov again in order to get this guy away. Molotov cocktails kind of become useless for a while because you already have a lot of flamethrower fuel at your disposal in order to get this guy away, and the game gives you back way more flamethrower fuel in the next section coming up. But as you see right there, you see how inconsistent that was? The amount of times I had to shoot the Xenomorph just then, just to force it back into the vent, is really frustrating. But look at the amount of items I have, and this is just one of the few times that I'm actually crafting. It's amazing just how much loot you're able to hold in your inventory, but still not have a lot of reason to use those resources to make items, because you're going to be finding a lot of different ways of getting through these sections without the use of items. But the Xenomorph is back, and I have to wait on the tram, so I need to prep my flamethrower. The tram takes forever to get over here, so try your best to not be spotted by the Xenomorph. You really need a lot of flamethrower fuel coming up. Even with the flamethrower fuel that the game gives you in the later sections, you're still going to need a lot, just in case the Xenomorph happens to screw you over. But the tram is here, and now I need to make a run for it. I'm going to try to use the flamethrower to slow the Xenomorph down. That way I have enough time to hit the prompt, but like I said before, the detection on these prompts is awful. But now that I've gotten to the next station, the Xenomorph is going to be around. The chances of it being inside of the vent when you get over here is exceedingly low. It's always going to be on the ground. So you're gonna have to use your maintenance jack or a noisemaker or any other kind of distraction to lure the Xenomorph away from the elevator. I choose to use my maintenance jack, and I try to use it on the left-hand side, but it doesn't work out in the end, and the Xenomorph ends up spotting me because it ends up turning in a direction that I don't want it to. And I'm just waiting. There we go. There's the distraction. And I'm going to try to use the crouch exploit to move a little bit faster. Only for some reason, the Xenomorph doesn't go for the distraction. I have to use my maintenance jack again in order for it to actually go for it this time. And it's actually making the noise indicating it heard it. So I don't know why the Xenomorph didn't hear the noise just then. But that was the worst possible spot I could have put my distraction. I wasn't really thinking about it at the time. But the Xenomorph is about to spot me, and I probably should have remained crouched so that it didn't hear me. But look at this. Watch this. That was so tense. That normally never works. If you get caught as you're trying to make your way into the elevator, you will not have enough time. But we now have a lone android, and this is the final android that we'll be dealing with. And I'm just going to use the bolt gun on them, and then this is a scripted encounter with the Xenomorph right here, so I'm going to use either my flamethrower or my Molotov on this guy, but I choose to use my flamethrower because I think it's better to have Molotovs for the next sequence coming up, because the next sequence coming up, we are in a completely tight corridor, and there's nowhere to run if the Xenomorph decides to catch you, so you need to be very reliant upon your flamethrower and also on your Molotovs. And with how consistent Molotovs are in forcing Xenomorphs back into the vents, you definitely need them for this upcoming sequence. But you need to interact with that console in order to gain access to the passcode, because that's just how outdated the scripting is on this game. And then grab the keycard. There is some additional flamethrower fuel inside of there, but there's going to be more coming up in the upcoming section. And go ahead and use the keycard on this passcode lock over here. And we're now going to move on to the next section. And I'm just going to remain in the walking status at all times to ensure that the Xenomorph doesn't jump out of the vents. And you're going to really understand just how tight this whole entire area is. It's a very interesting idea, but once again, because you're able to fight back in this game, it's allowed the developers to be given a little bit more freedom with the kind of sections they put you in. You know, if this was Outlast, you would never see any kind of enclosed corridor like this, and I mean, Outlast 2 did embrace such moments very rarely, but you had to resort to sliding or going prone in order to dodge attacks and then actually get past them. And it didn't really make a lot of sense how the enemies lost you in those sequences, because in a completely linear corridor, how is any enemy ever going to lose you when they know that there's only one place you're ever going to be, and it's at the other end of the corridor? It makes no sense in that game at all. At least this game provides some justification as to why these sections exist, and it's precisely why the whole idea of games where you're not able to fight back being true survival horror games is clearly a misconception, and it makes no sense at all. This is a true survival horror game because you're able to fight back, and the sections are far more dangerous compared to what you encounter in Outlast or in any other game where you're not able to fight back. But be careful of that facehugger and pick up the keycard. I don't know if that actually attracts the Xenomorph, because there's a scripted event that plays when you use the keycard on this where the Xenomorph is in the other room ahead of you. And it happens every time, and I don't know if that's going to cause the Xenomorph to come in faster than usual because I used the shotgun, because you'll hear it running right now. And I try to use my maintenance jack on these tables as a way of slowing it down, but it instead goes into the vent, so I tried to use this as a chance to get away, but the Xenomorph spots me. And look at that, just why did it stop? Why did it not just hyper armor through my flamethrower and just grab me? That was all luck right there. Once again, the flamethrower is so inconsistent on this game. But I'm just going to make a mad dash through this corridor because I know that the Xenomorph is very delayed when coming out of the vents after being hit by fire. And this is another scripted event that plays, so you need to get behind this table. It gives the impression you're supposed to use your flamethrower, but you actually aren't. And it's going to go back into the vent. At least on this recording. I don't know if this is guaranteed, but if it doesn't go back into the vents, you'll have to wait for it a little bit and just circle around it. But the game is going to turn off the power right here, so you need to go back to that generator in that previous room. And you're going to need to be very reliant upon distractions right here. I tried to use my revolver, but I don't think it works out in the end. because the Xenomorph is incredibly quick to turn around at times whenever it's investigating distractions. We'll see. Oh, it worked just then. Okay, never mind. But it's coming back. So that right there is very unfortunate, so I need to use my flamethrower right now. But I'm not going to use the flamethrower as a way of driving it back into the vents. I'm actually going to try to use it as a way of slowing the Xenomorph down. But for some reason, even though the Xenomorph made the sound that it normally does whenever it's trying to run towards you, it goes back into the vent. I don't know if this is a result of this so-called intelligent AI happening right now, but I just think it was just a delayed response. But because the Xenomorph is back in the vent, this is giving me a chance to sprint through once again, and I'm able to get to this generator very quickly, and we are going to be able to get back into that room and get inside of the vent. And I don't think the Xenomorph can follow you inside of that vent, unless it spots you going into the vent, of course, which I believe is a possible scenario that can occur. But the music is intensifying, indicating that most likely something is happening, but that's actually not the case. The Xenomorph AI is still behaving the exact same way. And looking back at this section, I probably should have been a little bit more reliant upon my Molotovs, because the Molotovs are completely useless after this point. And did you hear that just then? The Xenomorph was apparently down on the ground in that room I was just in, but it went back into the vent. But it doesn't matter. I'm being very cautious right now, so the Xenomorph can't possibly hear me unless it spots me through the windows. It's dropped down behind me, but I'm still being very cautious, and I'm not making a lot of noise, and the vent is right here. And once I'm inside that vent, I just completely skip to the elevator, and we're back near the very beginning of the game. And this time, because we have the Ion Torch, we can get through doors we weren't able to access previously. And I always find that very interesting, where the endpoint for a game is actually near the beginning of the game. It's like Evil Within in that sense, where in the Evil Within, you start off in Beacon Mental Asylum for the first chapter, and then you end at Beacon Mental Asylum at the beginning of chapter 15. And you even go through the exact same areas that you went through in chapter 1. And interesting fact, because of how buggy this game is, people on PC have actually found a way of glitching through doors. And by utilizing this glitch, they're able to glitch through this door right here near the beginning of the game, and they're able to skip every single mission except for Mission 18 and Mission 19. And that is how somebody managed to do a 22-minute speed run of this game, any percent. It's absolutely hilarious that that is possible. But we're now inside of Mission 18, and right now we need to interact with a bunch of consoles. The Xenomorphs aren't active until this conversation ends. The moment the conversation ends, that's when they're going to be active. And I'm going to speed up this whole vent process, because you're spending quite a long time in this vent. And now that I've pulled that lever there, I'm able to do this console over here. And you still want to remain in a walking status so that the Xenomorphs do not hear you. And there we go, we've done this puzzle right here. And now we need to interact with the console that is to our left. And be careful, there is a downed android. So once again, when it comes to downed androids that have all their limbs and their eyes are glowing, you need to make sure you are looking at them so that they do not grab you. And they grab you from like several feet away. It's ridiculous. I don't know why they had to give him that much range. It's so stupid. But extend the docking clamps and once again stare at the sky. But before I move on, I'm actually going to craft a noisemaker, and this is the very first time in this whole entire walkthrough that I'm actually using the noisemaker. You've never seen me use anything else. Like, how do you struggle with nightmare difficulty? That's what I don't understand. I mean, this game is fun. I don't really go to this game for difficulty. I just mainly go for all the fun things that you can do when it comes to like doing some really hilarious stuff with some of the enemies and just doing some hilarious stuff with the Xenomorph. But overall, this game is incredibly easy. And the noisemaker is going to come in handy when we have to deal with the two Xenomorphs that are on this section. But the game is going to give you some flamethrower fuel on the right over here. You're not going to see me utilize the flamethrower fuel whatsoever. All I'm going to do is use my maintenance jack and the noisemaker to lure the Xenomorphs up the stairs, and that will allow me to get past them very easily. So, after extending the maintenance rig, this is when the Xenomorphs are going to be active. There's going to be a scripted spawning of a Xenomorph when we open this door. It's going to be directly in front of you, so you need to crouch, and it's going to go down the stairs. So you're going to have to follow the Xenomorph and remain crouched at all times so it doesn't hear you. But don't get too close to it, because it can still hear you while you're crouching. And don't touch its tail, obviously. And that's normally a thing you can overlook in a lot of games, but they've actually made it where if you touch the Xenomorph's tail, it will actually be aggroed onto you. It really doesn't like it when you touch its tail. But anyway, when we get to this floor over here, be very careful not to emerge too quickly because that door is still open. I'm going to use the maintenance jack on that wall to lure both of the xenomorphs over here. There are times when it doesn't work, however, and you only attract one xenomorph. I suppose I could have used the revolver instead because the revolver generates a lot more noise. But regardless, I was still able to get these guys up here. But now that they're up here, I'm going to throw the noisemaker up the stairs. You have to make sure it doesn't bounce off the wall too much because there are times where it will bounce off the wall and completely fall down onto the ground below you. So they're both up there, and then once I get far enough away, I'm going to make a mad dash for the spacesuits. Because the moment you trigger this animation, you will despawn the xenomorphs, and it's just gonna cue this really stupid cutscene coming up. So, I don't really get this cutscene whatsoever. The xenomorph has been trying to kill us this whole entire time, but for some unknown reason, it makes a big exception in this case, where instead of killing Ripley, it's going to drag her up the vent and completely capture her, and it's going to embed her within a wall, which she's going to break free from. She still has all of her weapons, and she's somehow still alive. Yet when we were in the reactor maintenance area, every single human that was inside of the wall was dead. And yet somehow they didn't choose to kill Ripley. Why? It's such a lucky pass moment that is just completely undeserved. She should have just gotten into that EVA suit easily. Or even better, she could have just, you know, gotten out of the way and just used her flamethrower to drive the xenomorph away. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Now we have to do this little sequence right here, which is one of my least favorite parts of the game because of the facehuggers. You've already seen how broken the facehuggers are. Like, look at that. He went right through my flamethrower. How? It makes no sense. He could have easily grabbed me. It's so broken. But there's going to be a xenomorph right behind you. Make sure you keep your distance. I'm going to use the shotgun on this one. But because I'm using the shotgun, it's going to cause the acid blood to appear, and the acid blood has a lot of range, so that's why you need to keep your distance. There's some shotgun ammo, but it's best to use your flamethrower here because the facehugger is too close to you, and you can easily be damaged by the acid blood. And when it comes to dealing with facehuggers, always make sure they stand still before shooting them, so that their hitboxes aren't so bad on the detection. And there we go, we won't be seeing facehuggers for a while. And we're about to have a moment where two xenomorphs are right in front of us, but don't worry about that. There aren't any xenomorphs you have to worry about in this section. This is just a completely scripted moment, and the moment they just go back into the vents, you won't have to deal with them. You're free to sprint through this whole entire area. But there's the first one, and here's the second one. And that is a lovely view. Like I said before, I'm attracted to the xenomorphs a lot. I think they look absolutely amazing on this game. And it's nice to get a lot of different angles that we can stare at the xenomorph. But anyway, don't sprint right here because that xenomorph is very delayed when it comes to getting inside of the vent. And all that's left to do now is to get through this whole entire sequence. There's going to be some mandatory damage moments, like right over here. There's an elevator that we're currently standing on that's going to fall, and we're going to take damage from it. And then we have a moment where we need to go past a bunch of trams, and that's also going to do damage to you. And I'm just going to skip right over here. And you might have noticed that the game gave you a checkpoint before this moment. That's probably why, because you might have accidentally killed yourself on that tram. And for some unknown reason, the game does give you a lot of autosaves. I mean, I've never seen this many autosaves in such high abundance for any section of Alien Isolation. I mean, the only time you ever see a lot of autosaves in such a short area is the Anisadora. But there's only 2 autosaves for that sequence. This one, there's at least, I don't know, like 3 or 4 autosaves. But there's a mandatory damage moment. And that's the last tram that we have to deal with. And now we're just going to move forward. And we now have a sequence where we have to kill these facehuggers while they're inside of the vent. And I had a really stupid moment on one of my attempts where for some reason I had a game-breaking glitch where I could not aim my weapons. I could go into the menu for actually picking my weapons, but I could not aim my weapons during this sequence at one point. So I had to reload my save from a mission save. It was so stupid. I don't know why that happened. This game is so buggy. This needed so many patches. And a lot of the bugs seem to trigger whenever you're trying to restart the checkpoint, or you do something very odd that the game was probably not expecting you to do. Like, I think the main reason why that glitch happened was because I used my stun rod to counter the facehugger. That's at least from what I recall, but maybe that wasn't the full story. But watch out for the fire. The fire has a lot of Phantom Rage. Just walk right through it rather than sprint through it, just so you're less likely to be hit by the Phantom Range. I'm going to skip the spacesuit sequence, and we have this lovely encounter right here. Getting up close and personal with this lovely Xenomorph. You can even stop during this sequence, and weird things happen where the Xenomorph can actually glitch through you, and then it'll actually kill you, so get a nice little close-up on some of its body parts. I love this moment, especially like the music. It's very tense. I even played this music during the Scooby-Doo 2015 Alien film, which really changed up one of the scenes in such a horrific way. And I mean horrific. It was pretty scary. But that is pretty much the end of the game right there. And before I conclude the commentary here, I'm just going to showcase this updated strategy for the Seegson Communications area, where I throw my flare there, but rather than going directly over to the stairs, I'm going to cut through the communications area up ahead, and I'm just going to open up the vent, and that is definitely a better option, so that you immediately have access to that vent when the Xenomorph is around, so that you're less likely to be spotted by the humans and you're less likely to be spotted by the Xenomorph. So just like before, when I throw my flare and it gets to the other side of the room, it lures all the guards over there. And this room is entirely clear, and I'm able to access this vent over here. I do run into a little trouble, however, because the guy that was over by that console in the original recording, he's right near the vent. But it doesn't really matter where he is, because the humans are pretty slow to react to your presence, so I could have just sprinted right past him when he was in the correct position, which I do in the end, but I could have gone a little sooner. See what I mean, though? You see how quickly I was able to open this door compared to using the ion torch? This is what you always want to do, rather than using the ion torch. The animation takes such a long time to do. There's that human, and I'm just going to sprint right past him. And this has been my Alien Isolation, Nightmare difficulty, no damage, no human kills walkthrough. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.